The stained glass windows of Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church still glowed in the afternoon sun when Angela Williams, a 36-year-old mother of two, vanished on June 22, 2008. The service had ended just after noon, and the Williams family walked out with the rest of the congregation, fanning themselves against the summer heat. Angela carried her Bible in one hand, her daughter Danielle's small palm in the other, while 8-year-old Jordan skipped ahead toward the parking lot. That was the last moment her children remembered their mother standing beside them. By 12:45 p.m., neighbors recalled seeing Angela laughing with a friend near the side entrance of the church. Someone else claimed they spotted her moving toward the back lot, a place few people used. But after that, nothing. Her silver sedan sat untouched in the church lot, doors locked and keys still in her purse. She never made it home. At 1:30 p.m., Danielle and Jordan were still standing by their car, clutching hands, confused. Their father Marcus was miles away on a trucking route. The children's cell phones buzzed with unanswered calls to their mother. Angela's voicemail clicked on after one ring. The sun blazed hotter. The parking lot emptied. And two children were left waiting in the silence. This is the story of a woman who seemed to vanish into thin air, a disappearance that haunted Atlanta for 15 years. And the shocking truth would not come from police or detectives or missing persons flyers. It would sit across from her daughter at a dinner table 15 years later, staring back with the same eyes she thought she would never see again. Before we dive in, ask yourself this. If a mother can disappear in broad daylight, surrounded by neighbors and friends without anyone noticing, how safe are you really? These stories aren't just chilling, they're warnings. Subscribe now, because if you're not watching, you'll be the last to know when danger is closest. And if you choose not to subscribe, tell me in the comments, what makes you so sure it couldn't happen to someone you love? Angela Williams' story began like so many others. A Sunday in the South. The heat rising off cracked pavement. The smell of fried chicken and cornbread wafting from kitchens as families drove home after service. Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church had been an anchor for generations, a place of worship, of gossip, of comfort. That morning, Angela had looked radiant, her pressed skirt and wide-brimmed hat making her stand out even in the crowded pews. She sang softly, almost under her breath, during the hymns. Her daughter Danielle hummed along, clinging to her side. Jordan fidgeted, restless, tapping his shoes against the pew. And Pastor Green's sermon struck a note that seemed strange in hindsight. He spoke of storms. He spoke of faith carrying you through the darkness. People later said his words felt like an omen. Angela hugged friends after service, promising Sister Lewis she'd bring her famous sweet potato pie to the fish fry next weekend. She smiled, waved, and walked her children toward the car. Danielle remembered her mother's hand in hers, warm and steady, just before it slipped away. That was it. That was the last trace of her. No one saw Angela drive off. No one heard her call home. By evening, her family was in shock. By the next day, her face was on missing person flyers stapled to telephone poles across Atlanta. But in those first crucial minutes, the moments after Angela disappeared, her children were just standing there, waiting, staring at the space where their mother should have been. And what happened next would change their lives forever. The church parking lot was nearly empty by the time Danielle realized her mother wasn't coming back. The last cars rolled out, engines humming, laughter fading down the street. The cicadas screamed in the summer heat, drowning out the silence between Danielle and her brother. Jordan tugged at her arm, his face red and damp with sweat. "Where's Mommy? Didn't she say we were going home?" Danielle swallowed hard. She didn't have an answer. She was 12 years old, standing in an empty parking lot, clutching her little brother's hand while the sun baked the asphalt beneath her shoes. She tried calling her mother's phone. Straight to voicemail. She called again. Same thing. The minutes stretched into hours. The siblings sat on the curb, staring at their locked sedan, waiting for a familiar figure to appear. But no one came. Angela's purse was still in the car. Her Bible lay neatly on the seat. Danielle didn't understand it yet, but those details were the first signs that something was horribly wrong. At 3 p.m., Danielle borrowed a phone from a church deacon and tried to reach her father. But Marcus was on the road, hauling freight through Alabama. His voicemail picked up after a few rings. By 4:30, panic set in. Sister Lewis found the children still sitting by the car, Danielle pale and trembling. She called Angela's relatives, and soon the Williams house filled with worried family members. Angela's mother, Miss Evelyn, paced the living room, tears streaming down her face as she called Angela's phone over and over. No answer. By nightfall, the family made the call no one wanted to make. They filed a missing persons report. But the Atlanta police didn't take it seriously. To them, Angela Williams was just another adult who'd maybe chosen to walk away from her life. The officer at the desk even shrugged and said, "She'll probably be back in a day or two." Imagine hearing that about your mother. Imagine being 12, begging a stranger in uniform to find her, and being told she probably just left on her own. Would you believe it? Or would you feel the same creeping dread Danielle did that night? The sense that the world no longer cared whether her mother lived or died. This is exactly why I share these stories. Because too often families are ignored, and cases are dismissed before they even begin. If you don't subscribe, ask yourself, what if it's your loved one who disappears and the police decide not to look? Wouldn't you want people paying attention? Subscribe right now, because silence is the reason so many cold cases remain unsolved. And if you still won't subscribe, I need you to drop into the comments and tell me why. Why would you stay quiet when stories like Angela's prove silence kills hope? The next days blurred together. Flyers went up on every corner, Angela's smiling face printed above the words "Missing Mother of Two." Volunteers from the church formed search groups. Families walked through wooded lots, alleys, and parks, calling her name. Local news ran a short segment, but it didn't last long. In a city where people vanished every week, Angela's story was just another headline. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed they saw her talking to a man in a dark sedan outside the church. Others swore she was spotted at a gas station 2 towns over. Each lead fizzled into nothing. Every false sighting cut deeper into Danielle's hope. But what hurt most were the whispers. Adults thought children weren't listening when they said Angela might have run off with another man. That maybe Marcus knew more than he was admitting. That maybe drugs or gambling were involved. Danielle heard it all. And none of it sounded like her mother. She remembered the last hymn of the service that morning, the way her mother's hand squeezed hers. That wasn't the hand of a woman about to abandon her family. The house grew quieter each day. Marcus returned from his route and searched tirelessly, but with each passing week, bitterness crept into his voice. He worked longer hours, drove farther routes, anything to keep from sitting in a house that no longer felt like a home. For Danielle, life shifted overnight. She woke up early to make sure Jordan got to school. She cooked what little she could, learned to braid his hair, and reminded him to do homework. Every night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if her mother was still alive. And Jordan, he stopped asking where mommy went. But his silence was louder than his questions ever were. Angela's face remained on flyers for months. But eventually they faded, tore in the rain, and disappeared. Just like she had. Now pause for a second. Imagine you're Danielle. Imagine the weight of being 12 years old and realizing no one was coming to save your family. Wouldn't you want the world to pay attention? If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because stories like this vanish just like the people in them when no one listens. And if you're still not subscribing, at least comment and tell me why, because silence helps no one. By the end of that summer, Angela Williams's case had already gone cold. Police moved on to other priorities. The church community whispered less and less. And the Williams family lived with a wound that never closed. But here's the thing. Disappearances don't just vanish into thin air. Someone always knows something. And in Angela's case, the truth didn't just vanish with her. It was buried in silence, buried in fear. And one day, it was bound to come back. The first week after Angela Williams vanished was chaos. Search parties scoured the streets, combing through alleyways, wooded lots, and abandoned houses. Flyers printed with Angela's smiling face were taped to stop signs, gas station windows, and the walls of corner stores. They read "Missing Mother of Two" in bold black letters. Danielle helped her grandmother tape them up, her small hands smoothing the paper against brick walls as her heart silently begged for someone to recognize her mother. By the end of the second week, the Williams home was a revolving door of neighbors and church members bringing casseroles and prayers. But none of it filled the growing void. Angela's mother, Miss Evelyn, stood on her porch night after night, tears staining her cheeks as news cameras pointed at her trembling face. "Please," she begged into the microphone, voice breaking. "If anyone knows where my baby is, I'm begging you, please bring her home." That clip aired on the local evening news, and for a brief moment, the entire city of Atlanta leaned in. Angela's story wasn't just another disappearance, it was a family torn apart. A mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, missing without a trace. But attention fades quickly in a city with too many tragedies. By the end of the month, Angela's case was no longer headline news. False leads trickled in. One man claimed he saw a woman matching Angela's description at a truck stop 2 hours away. Police checked. It wasn't her. Another caller swore they saw her at a Greyhound bus station, boarding a bus headed north. That too went nowhere. But the most chilling rumor came from inside the church itself. Several congregants whispered about a dark sedan spotted lingering near the side entrance that morning. Some swore they saw Angela speaking to a man inside. No one could describe his face, only the car, dark and nondescript, with windows rolled up. The rumor grew. Was this a kidnapping? A lover's secret? Or something far worse? Every false sighting cut deeper into the Williams family. Marcus returned from his trucking route a broken man. He spent nights sitting at the kitchen table, staring at Angela's untouched coffee cup as though she'd walk in and drink it any second. Danielle overheard him muttering prayers, cursing God, and sometimes just sitting in silence until dawn. Jordan cried himself to sleep for weeks. He asked questions no one could answer. Did Mommy get lost? Did somebody take her? Is she in heaven? Danielle, only 12, tried to hold him, but inside she was drowning too. The community rallied, but even their support carried weight. Candlelight vigils filled the churchyard, dozens of flickering flames lighting the night as voices prayed for Angela's safe return. People sang hymns, wept openly, and hugged Evelyn as she trembled under the weight of it all. But whispers spread through those same crowds. Some questioned Marcus. Why wasn't he at church that morning? Could he have known more than he admitted? Others speculated Angela had simply run off. One woman even muttered that maybe Angela had been living a double life. Danielle heard these things. She didn't want to, but she couldn't block them out. To her, they weren't just rumors, they were attacks on the memory of her mother. She knew the truth in her heart. Angela hadn't abandoned them. Something terrible had happened. But the police didn't seem to agree. To them, it was just another adult missing. No signs of foul play. No body. No crime scene. Just a woman who walked out of church and didn't come back. Now think about that. Imagine your mother disappears, and the people meant to protect you shrug it off. Imagine hearing neighbors say she wanted to leave, while you know in your bones she didn't. Wouldn't that make you desperate to scream the truth to anyone who would listen? If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, ask yourself, what happens when your loved one goes missing and no one listens? Subscribe right now, because silence is the reason families like the Williamses never find peace. And if you still won't subscribe, drop into the comments and tell me why. Why would you turn away from a story that could just as easily be yours one day? As the days dragged into weeks, the Williams home grew heavier. Meals went uneaten. The laughter that once filled the kitchen was gone. Marcus sank deeper into himself, rarely smiling, rarely speaking. Danielle started cooking what little she could manage: peanut butter sandwiches for Jordan, boxed macaroni when there was money. She tried to hold it together, but every night she cried into her pillow, whispering prayers she wasn't sure anyone was listening to. Jordan began to withdraw too. He stopped playing with neighborhood kids. Stopped running through the yard. He sat in his room, clutching the last toy his mother had given him, a small red fire truck, and stared at the door as though she might walk through it at any moment. The house itself seemed to change. Angela's perfume lingered in the air, faint but haunting. Her shoes by the door gathered dust. Her favorite mug sat untouched in the cupboard. Every item became a reminder of what was lost. And as weeks turned into months, reality sank in. Angela wasn't coming home. But the questions never stopped. Where had she gone? Who had taken her? What? The truth was buried deep, hidden behind rumors and silence. But what no one realized then was that the truth wasn't gone forever. It was only waiting for the right moment to resurface. Time moved forward, but for the Williams family, life never truly did. By the second year without Angela, the house on Pinecrest Avenue had lost its warmth. The curtains stayed drawn most days. Meals were eaten in silence. Marcus, once known for his booming laugh and Sunday barbecues, became a ghost in his own home. He worked longer trucking routes, disappearing for weeks at a time, and when he was home he barely spoke. He sat at the kitchen table late into the night, staring at nothing, a cigarette burning to ash between his fingers. Danielle learned to stop asking questions. She learned to stop expecting answers. She was just a teenager, but already she had taken on the role her mother once filled, making sure Jordan brushed his teeth, packing his lunches, braiding his hair before school. She cooked macaroni when there was money, rice and beans when there wasn't. She grew up before her time not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. Jordan struggled quietly. He didn't lash out, didn't scream, didn't cause trouble. He just retreated into himself. Teachers noticed he rarely raised his hand, that his once bright energy had dimmed. At home, he sat in his room, clutching the little red fire truck Angela had given him. Sometimes Danielle would pass by and hear him whispering to it, as though it were his mother listening. By year 4, the flyers had all but disappeared. The vigils had dwindled. The church no longer brought up Angela's name during service. Life in Atlanta had moved on. But for Danielle and Jordan, the silence was louder than any sermon. Marcus hardened. He started snapping at Danielle for small things, dirty dishes, forgotten chores. Sometimes, when he thought no one was listening, he muttered under his breath, "She left us. She just left us." Danielle wanted to argue, wanted to defend her mother, but the words never came out. She simply clenched her fists and walked away. Now imagine being a child and watching your family unravel year after year. Imagine your father drowning in bitterness, your brother slipping away, and you, just a teenager, being the only thread holding what's left together. Wouldn't you want someone to step in? Wouldn't you want someone to keep Angela's story alive? If you haven't subscribed yet, think about this. Silence is what kills cold cases. Families collapse when no one cares. Subscribe right now so we can keep these stories breathing. And if you're still not subscribing, at least comment and tell me why, because if you choose silence, you're no different from the people who let Angela's case fade into dust. 8 years passed. 8 birthdays for Jordan. 8 Christmas mornings without Angela's smile. 8 years of Danielle cooking dinners she was too young to cook, paying bills she shouldn't have been responsible for, tucking her little brother into bed with promises she wasn't sure she believed. And then Marcus was gone. It was 2016 when he died suddenly, heart attack, the doctor said. Danielle wasn't surprised. The bitterness had eaten him alive. He died with unanswered questions carved into his silence. No final confession. No truth about what he knew or suspected. Just a hollow absence layered on top of the one Angela had left behind. Danielle was 17. She stood at her father's funeral beside Jordan, clutching his hand the same way she had the day Angela vanished. She realized in that moment they were orphans of the living and the dead, children left behind by 2 parents, one buried in the ground, the other lost to mystery. Jordan cried openly at the graveside. Danielle didn't. She couldn't. Her tears had run out years before. By the following year, Danielle left Atlanta for college in North Carolina. It should have been a fresh start, but the shadow of her mother's disappearance followed her everywhere. While other students laughed in dorm rooms and complained about finals, Danielle was on missing person forums, emailing retired detectives, filing Freedom of Information requests for her mother's case file. Nothing came back. Every denial, every unanswered email, was another brick in the wall of silence. She studied criminal justice, not because she had dreamed of it as a child, but because she couldn't escape the feeling that her life had been rewritten by the absence of justice. Every lecture about cold cases was a knife twisting deeper. Every time a professor spoke about statistics, Danielle thought, I am the statistic. Back in Atlanta, Jordan grew into a young man under the same shadow. He stayed quiet, worked odd jobs, but rarely spoke about his mother. The silence between him and Danielle grew too, distance not just in miles but in grief handled differently. By Angela's 8th year missing, her case file sat in a dusty cabinet in the Atlanta Police Department, forgotten by almost everyone. A detective once admitted off-camera that he hadn't thought about it in years. To them, Angela Williams was just another file, another number. But Danielle hadn't forgotten. She carried her mother's memory like a stone in her chest, heavy and unmovable. Every holiday, every birthday, every family milestone, they all came with an empty chair that no one dared to fill. Now stop and think about this. If a case like Angela's can be boxed up and forgotten, what does that mean for the hundreds of families living the same nightmare? If you don't subscribe, you're letting silence win. And if silence wins, more families will be left with nothing but dust and memories. Subscribe now. And if you refuse, I want you to tell me why in the comments. Because the truth is, if we don't pay attention, no one will. For Danielle, the years were not healing. They were a slow erasure. Every day her mother was missing, Angela became less of a person to the world and more of a ghost. But for Danielle, the ghost never left. And as much as she tried to move forward, studying, working, pretending to build a future, she knew the past wasn't done with her. Because the truth about her mother hadn't disappeared. It was still out there, waiting. By the spring of 2023, 15 years had passed since Angela Williams vanished. The world had moved forward, but for Danielle, now 27 years old, the shadow of her mother's disappearance was never far away. She had learned to live with it, or at least pretend to, burying herself in work, in school, in anything that kept her mind from circling the same unanswered questions. But some memories can't be outrun. And for Danielle, they came rushing back the night she returned to Atlanta for her younger brother's birthday. Jordan was turning 23, and he insisted on hosting a small dinner at his apartment. Danielle arrived with a bottle of wine tucked under her arm, expecting a simple night. Laughter, good food, maybe even a moment of joy. The door swung open to the smell of baked macaroni and collard greens, the kind of meal their mother used to make. Music pulsed low in the background, and guests filled the living room with chatter and warmth. Danielle smiled, relieved to see her brother happy. He had struggled for so long in silence, and tonight he finally seemed to have found a little light. She set the wine on the counter, hugged him tightly, and let herself breathe. Then she turned toward the dinner table and froze. There, sitting casually with a plate of food in front of her, was a woman Danielle had never seen before. Or at least, that's what her mind told her at first. But something deeper, something buried in her bones, screamed otherwise. The woman looked older, thinner, her hair streaked with gray. But the curve of her smile, the shape of her eyes, the small scar on her wrist, it was all unmistakable. Danielle's heart pounded. Her hands went cold. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. The sounds of laughter and clinking silverware blurred into a dull hum as her eyes locked on the woman across the table. It was her. It was Angela Williams, the mother who had vanished 15 years earlier. Danielle's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her voice stuck in her throat. The room seemed to shrink, walls closing in, air growing heavy. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself, her nails digging into the wood. The woman, Angela or whoever she was, noticed. Their eyes met. And for a brief second, it was as if time reversed, as if Danielle was 12 again, standing in that church parking lot, clutching her brother's hand and waiting for her mother to come back. Except now she was here, alive, and sitting across the dinner table as if nothing had happened. Now stop for just a moment. Imagine this. 15 years after your mother vanished, you walk into a room and see her sitting there, older, changed, but alive. Would your first instinct be relief? Or rage? Or would you feel like Danielle, paralyzed, drowning in questions that burned hotter with every passing second? If you're watching this, ask yourself, what would you do in her place? And before you answer, make sure you subscribe, because these are the stories no one expects, the ones that prove how fragile the truth really is. And if you won't subscribe, I need you in the comments telling me why. Why would you turn away when families like the Williamses prove that silence only deepens the mystery? Jordan didn't notice at first. He was busy greeting friends, making sure everyone had a plate. He laughed, poured drinks, completely unaware that his sister stood frozen in shock. The guests chatted, oblivious. The woman, Angela, kept her eyes lowered, pushing food around her plate as though she too wished the ground would swallow her whole. Danielle forced herself to sit down, though her body trembled. She barely touched her food. Her mind spun in circles, replaying every detail. The scar on her wrist. The way she hummed softly under her breath. The exact tune Angela used to sing while cooking. Every piece of evidence screamed the same truth. It was her. But how? What? The dinner carried on in a blur. Danielle heard laughter, clinking glasses, the scrape of chairs, but it all felt distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Every time her eyes drifted across the table, her stomach twisted. Her mother, alive. Her mother here. She remembered the long nights she spent staring at the ceiling, praying for answers. The birthdays where she lit candles in silence. The Christmas mornings filled with empty chairs. 15 years of grief, of silence, of whispers and rumors, and here was her mother, sitting across from her as though none of it had ever happened. Her hands trembled under the table. Her breath came shallow. She didn't know whether to cry or rage or both. Now think about this. If Danielle had never come home that night, if she had never walked into that room, Angela's truth would still be hidden. How many other truths are still buried right now, in families, in communities, in places where no one is looking? This is why you can't just watch and move on. Subscribe now, because ignoring these stories doesn't just silence the past, it blinds you to the future. And if you still won't subscribe, tell me in the comments. Because if you won't listen, maybe you're afraid of what the truth might reveal. Danielle's fork clinked against her plate as she forced herself to eat, though the food tasted like ash in her mouth. She wanted to confront the woman immediately, to shout, "Where have you been? Why did you leave us?" But the room was too full, the moment too fragile. One wrong move and the secret would explode in front of everyone. So she waited. She bided her time, her heart racing, her hands shaking. She knew the answers were coming. But what she didn't know was just how dark those answers would be. The dinner stretched on, but for Danielle, every second felt unbearable. She couldn't take her eyes off the woman at the table, couldn't shake the pounding in her chest. Plates clattered, forks scraped, laughter bounced off the walls, but it was all muted noise behind the thunder of her heartbeat. Jordan finally noticed the tension in his sister's face. He chuckled nervously, lifting his glass as though to break the silence. "Dee, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Danielle's lips parted, but no words came. She glanced at the woman again. Angela's, no Linda's, eyes flickered up for just a moment, then fell to her plate. Jordan shifted uncomfortably, then spoke the words that made Danielle's stomach twist. "This is Linda. She's been helping me out lately. Kind of like family. Kind of like family." The phrase rattled around Danielle's head like a cruel joke. She wanted to scream, "That's not like family, that is family." But instead, she forced a stiff nod, pretending to accept it, while inside, every nerve screamed in disbelief. The guests carried on. Jokes about work, laughter about childhood memories, music pulsing faintly from a speaker in the corner. But for Danielle, the room was split in two, everyone else enjoying dinner and her, locked in a silent war with the truth sitting across the table. Angela, Linda, barely spoke. She pushed food around her plate, nodded when someone asked her a question, offered the occasional thin smile. But her eyes never truly met Danielle's. It was as if she was hiding in plain sight, hoping no one would call her out. The evening crawled by until the last guest left, hugging Jordan at the door, waving goodnight. The apartment felt quiet, the music cut off, the laughter gone. Only the three of them remained. Danielle stood frozen by the sink, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. The silence stretched thick and unbearable. Finally she spoke, her voice low but shaking. "Jordan, who is she? Don't lie to me." Jordan's smile faltered. He looked at the woman on the couch, then back at his sister. He ran a hand over his face, sighing deeply. I didn't want it to happen like this." Danielle's throat tightened. Her voice cracked. "That's Mom, isn't it?" Jordan didn't answer at first. His silence said more than words ever could. Danielle felt her chest cave in, the world spinning around her. When he finally spoke, his words shattered her. "Yeah, it's her." Danielle staggered back, gripping the chair for support. 15 years of silence, of grief, of wondering, and the truth was sitting right there. She turned to the woman, her voice rising with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "Where have you been? Do you have any idea what you put us through?" Angela, no Linda, looked up with tears in her eyes. Her voice trembled. "Danielle, I never wanted to leave you. I never wanted any of this." "Then why?" Danielle demanded, her voice shaking with fury. "Why did you disappear? Why let us think you were dead?" Angela's lips quivered. She clutched her hands together, struggling to speak. Finally, the words came out in fragments. "There were things you didn't know. Things I couldn't protect you from if I stayed. People at the church. People who wanted things from me. I was in danger. And if I stayed, you would have been too." Danielle's head spun. The church? Their sacred place, their home every Sunday, the place that raised them, suddenly twisted into something sinister. Angela wiped her eyes, her voice breaking. "I thought leaving was the only way to keep you safe. I thought if I disappeared, they'd leave you alone. It was the hardest decision I ever made." Danielle's heart twisted. She wanted to believe her, wanted to accept the explanation. But 15 years of pain didn't dissolve in a single confession. She thought of Jordan's sleepless nights, Marcus's bitterness, Evelyn's desperate pleas on the news. "You left us," Danielle whispered. "You let us grow up without you. You let Dad die wondering what happened." Angela sobbed, covering her face. Jordan stood between them, torn, his own eyes glassy. She was scared. She thought she was protecting us. But Danielle's fury boiled over. "Protecting us? You destroyed us. Do you even know what it was like? Every birthday, every holiday, every night praying you'd come back. Do you know what that feels like?" The silence was deafening. Angela wept. Jordan looked away. Danielle's chest heaved with rage. "Now pause here. Imagine your mother disappearing for 15 years. Not because she was taken, not because she was murdered, but because she chose to leave. Would you forgive her? Or would you feel like Danielle, betrayed, abandoned, shattered? If you're watching this, ask yourself honestly, what would you have done in her shoes? And before you answer, subscribe right now. Because these aren't just stories, they're lessons in betrayal, in survival, in the darkest corners of family life. And if you won't subscribe, then leave a comment and tell me why. Tell me how you'd ignore a truth like this, if it sat across from your dinner table. Angela reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Danielle, I always loved you. That never changed." Danielle recoiled. She didn't want love. She wanted answers. And that's when Jordan spoke again, his voice low, almost a whisper. "There's more you don't know. Things she hasn't told you yet." Danielle turned sharply toward him, eyes blazing. "What else?" Jordan's gaze shifted to Angela, then back to Danielle. His voice shook. "It wasn't just about the church. There are things about Dad, things you're not ready to hear." Danielle's breath caught. Her heart thudded in her chest. The room spun as the weight of his words settled over her. The betrayal wasn't over. The truth wasn't finished. And what came next would shatter everything she thought she knew about her family. The apartment was quiet, the air thick with tension. Angela sat hunched on the couch, her hands trembling in her lap. Jordan sat close to her, protective, while Danielle stood near the kitchen, her arms crossed tightly, her chest heaving with anger. Finally, Angela broke the silence. "You deserve to know everything," she whispered, her voice raw. "The truth isn't simple. But I swear to you, I never stopped loving you." Danielle's jaw clenched. "Then prove it. Tell me why you disappeared." Angela inhaled sharply, closing her eyes. When she opened them again, they glistened with tears. "It started at Greater Ebenezer Baptist. The church we thought was safe, it wasn't safe for me anymore." Danielle frowned, confused. Angela's voice cracked as she continued. "There was a man, someone respected, someone people trusted. A deacon. He became obsessed with me. At first it was small things, compliments, too much attention. Then it turned darker. He started showing up where I went, calling when Marcus wasn't home. He knew details about my life he shouldn't have known. He said if I didn't give him what he wanted, he'd ruin me." Danielle's stomach twisted. "Ruin you how?" Angela's hands shook harder. "He had things on Marcus. Secrets. He threatened to expose them. And he threatened me too. Said if I didn't cooperate, he'd make sure everyone at church believed lies about me. That he'd take my children away." Danielle shook her head in disbelief. "So you just left? You abandoned us?" Angela's voice rose, desperate. "Don't you understand? I thought if I disappeared he'd stop. If I wasn't there he couldn't hurt you. He couldn't use me against Marcus. I thought it was the only way to protect you." Danielle's throat burned. She wanted to scream, to claw back every year of loneliness. "You thought leaving us alone was protection? Do you know what it did to us? To Dad? To Jordan? To me?" Angela reached forward, her voice breaking. "I know I failed you. I know I did. But every day I lived as Linda, I carried you with me. I changed my name, moved to another part of Georgia, worked cleaning jobs just to survive. Every birthday, every holiday, I thought of you. I wanted to come back, but I was afraid. Afraid he'd find me and through me find you." Danielle's eyes filled with hot tears, but her anger burned stronger than her grief. "So instead of facing him, instead of fighting for us, you vanished. You left us to wonder if you were dead or if we weren't worth staying for." Angela broke down, her sobs filling the room. Jordan rubbed her back gently, but his own face was wet with tears. "Dee," he whispered, "I found her years ago. I tracked her down. I begged her to come back, but she said it wasn't safe. She promised me she'd explain when the time was right. Danielle's chest tightened. She turned her fury on him. And you didn't tell me? You let me live every single day believing she was dead. Jordan's eyes dropped to the floor. I thought I was protecting you too. Now pause here. Imagine hearing this from your own family. Imagine your mother admits she left you not because she was taken, but because she was scared. Imagine your brother confessing he kept her secret for years. Would you feel safe? Or would you feel like Danielle, betrayed by the very people you trusted most? If you haven't subscribed yet, you need to now. Because these aren't just stories, they're warnings. If you won't subscribe, tell me why in the comments. Because silence doesn't just hide the truth, it destroys families. Angela wiped her face, her voice trembling. Danielle, I know you hate me. I can live with that. But I need you to understand, I thought disappearing was the only way to keep you safe. Danielle stared at her mother's face, searching for the woman she remembered, but all she saw was a stranger wearing Angela's skin. A stranger who had left her to carry burdens no child should. Angela whispered, "Please, forgive me." But forgiveness wasn't in Danielle's heart. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Jordan looked between them, torn. His voice cracked. "Dee, there's more to this. Things about Dad, things I never told you." Danielle's breath caught. She stared at him, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Jordan hesitated, glancing at Angela. Her eyes dropped, her lips pressed tight. "There's something you need to see," Jordan finally said. Danielle's pulse raced. She didn't know what he meant, but she could feel it, the weight of another truth waiting to crush her. That night, Danielle couldn't sleep. Jordan had given her the guest room, but the walls seemed to close in, and every creak of the apartment gnawed at her nerves. Angela, her mother, was asleep down the hall. Jordan too had gone quiet. But Danielle lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Angela had spoken. The story of the deacon. The threats. The blackmail. It made sense, but it didn't. Something inside her still felt wrong. There were gaps, unanswered questions. Why hadn't Angela gone to the police? Why had she trusted vanishing over fighting back? And what exactly did Jordan mean when he hinted there were things about Marcus, about their father, that Danielle didn't know? At 2 a.m., restless and burning with suspicion, Danielle slipped out of bed. The apartment was dark, shadows stretching across the floor. She moved quietly, her heart pounding, until she reached Jordan's room. She hesitated at the door. Her brother had never lied to her growing up. But tonight, she had learned he'd been keeping the biggest secret of all. And if there was more she needed to know. She pushed the door open. The faint glow of a street lamp filtered through the blinds, casting pale lines across the floor. Jordan's desk sat cluttered with papers, unopened mail, and a small wooden box shoved to the back corner. Something about the box drew her in. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling, and lifted the lid. Inside were scraps of old flyers, yellowed newspaper clippings about missing persons, and then, folded carefully, almost reverently, an envelope. Her breath caught. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was her mother's. Hands shaking, she unfolded the letter. "My sweet Jordan, if you are reading this, it means I could not come back. Please understand, I did not leave because I stopped loving you. I left because the danger was closer than anyone knew. It wasn't only the deacon. It was your father. Marcus was not the man Danielle believed him to be. He was hiding things. Dangerous things. And I feared if I stayed, you both would be caught in the middle of it. Take care of your sister. Protect her from the truth until she is strong enough to face it." "Mom?" Danielle's knees buckled. She sank onto the bed, clutching the paper, her chest tightening with every word. Marcus? Her father? The man who raised her, who grieved, who died with questions carved into his silence. Her mother was accusing him. The room tilted. Her stomach churned. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. She stormed into the living room, letter clutched in her fist. Jordan sat up from the couch, startled, rubbing his eyes. "Dee? What's wrong?" She threw the letter onto the coffee table. You knew this whole time." Jordan's face paled. His eyes darted to the letter, then back to his sister. "Dee, listen." "Don't you dare tell me to listen," Danielle snapped, her voice cracking. "You let me believe Dad was a good man. You let me cry over him. You let me think he was broken by losing Mom when all along, she choked on the words. All along he was part of the reason she left? Jordan's hands shook as he tried to explain. I didn't want you to lose him too. You already lost Mom. I thought if you believed Dad was good, at least you'd have something to hold on to. You needed that. You were just a kid. Danielle's eyes burned. I didn't need lies. I needed the truth. And you robbed me of that. Tears filled Jordan's eyes. I was trying to protect you. Danielle's voice lowered, thick with betrayal. That's what Mom said too. Both of you, protecting me. But all you did was bury me under lies. The silence between them cut deeper than any words. Now pause for a second. Imagine this is your family. Imagine the father you trusted is suddenly painted as a man with dark secrets, and your own brother admits he hid it from you for years. Would you forgive him? Or would you feel like Danielle, betrayed on every side? If you're watching this, subscribe right now. Because this isn't just a story, it's a reminder that family secrets destroy families. And if you won't subscribe, tell me in the comments why. Because silence is the same as hiding the truth. Jordan reached for the letter, but Danielle snatched it back, holding it tight. No, this stays with me. You had your chance. Now I need answers. Her brother's face crumpled. Dee, please. If you dig too deep, you might not like what you find. Danielle's jaw tightened. I already don't like what I've found. And I'm not stopping now. Angela appeared in the hallway, awakened by the raised voices. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. You read the letter? She whispered. Danielle turned to her, fury and pain etched across her face. Tell me everything. About Dad. About the deacon. About why you really left. Angela's lips trembled. She looked at Jordan, then back at her daughter. Tears filled her eyes. There are things you don't know, she whispered. Things about your father that could destroy everything you believe about him. Danielle's chest heaved. Then it's time I finally knew. The letter trembled in Danielle's hands, its words echoing louder than anything her mother had just confessed. Marcus was not the man Danielle believed him to be. Her father. The man she had idolized, defended, mourned. A man whose laughter once filled their home, whose arms once carried her on his shoulders. A man who sat hollow-eyed at the kitchen table after Angela vanished, drowning in silence. Could that man also be someone dangerous? Someone tied to the reason her mother disappeared? Danielle's mind spiraled. No, she whispered, shaking her head. Not Dad. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't what you're saying. Jordan's voice was quiet, trembling. Dee, you didn't see everything. You were young. But I remember things. Danielle looked at him sharply. What things? Jordan rubbed his hands together, eyes downcast. Nights when you were asleep but I was awake. I'd hear them, Mom and Dad, arguing. Not normal arguments. Scary ones. Mom crying, Dad yelling. I remember her saying things like, they'll find out, and Dad telling her to keep her mouth shut. Danielle's heart pounded. Find out what? Jordan shook his head. I don't know. I was a kid. But it was bad. One night I heard glass shatter. Another time Mom locked herself in the bathroom. I heard her whispering on the phone, begging someone not to tell Dad she had called. Danielle's stomach turned. Memories she had buried came flooding back. She remembered the nights Marcus stayed out late, the smell of alcohol when he came home. She remembered Angela's eyes, red, tired, as though she'd been crying in secret. She remembered waking to hushed arguments behind closed doors, her parents' voices low but sharp. But she had told herself it was normal. Every family argued. Every marriage had cracks. Now, with the letter in her hands, those cracks split wide open. Danielle's voice broke. Why didn't anyone say anything? Why didn't you tell me? Jordan's eyes filled with tears. Because I wanted you to have something good to hold on to. You always saw Dad as a hero. I didn't want to take that away from you. Danielle's chest tightened. You didn't give me the truth. You gave me a lie. Angela sobbed softly from the couch, rocking slightly as if her body still carried the weight of the years she'd spent in hiding. Marcus was charming to everyone else. To the church. To the neighbors. But behind closed doors, there were things I couldn't ignore. He had debts. He had people around him that frightened me. And when that deacon started circling me, Marcus wouldn't confront him. He told me to stay quiet. Danielle shook her head, her voice sharp. So instead of fighting, you vanished. And Dad, he died with all his secrets, leaving us broken. Angela whispered, I thought disappearing was my only choice. I thought if I stayed, you'd both be destroyed. The silence that followed was suffocating. Danielle's image of her father was crumbling, but part of her resisted. Marcus had been her anchor, her proof that at least one parent stayed when the other disappeared. To let go of that image felt like losing him all over again. Now stop and think about this. What would you do if the father you trusted was suddenly painted as a man full of secrets? Would you cling to the memories that made you feel safe, or would you face the possibility that your childhood was built on lies? If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, you need to. Because these aren't just stories, they're warnings about the things hidden in plain sight. And if you refuse to subscribe, I need you in the comments explaining why. Because silence protects the very secrets that destroy families. Danielle pressed her palms against her face, trying to breathe. Flashbacks swirled through her mind. Marcus tucking Jordan into bed, Marcus teaching her to ride a bike, Marcus clapping proudly when she graduated elementary school. Could all of that coexist with the darker memories? The nights he vanished for days. The bitter silence at dinner. The unopened bills hidden in drawers. She dropped her hands and glared at Angela. You should have told us. You should have told me. Instead, you left us with half a story. Angela's voice cracked. Would you have believed me? You worshipped your father. Everyone did. Danielle didn't answer. She couldn't. Jordan's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I loved him too, Dee. But loving him doesn't mean he was innocent. The room seemed to tilt under the weight of it all. The family Danielle thought she knew, the narrative she had clung to for 15 years, was fracturing piece by piece. Her mother, alive but absent. Her father, dead but guilty. Her brother, complicit in the lies. Danielle stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. I can't sit here anymore. If Dad had secrets, I need to know what they were. I need to see it for myself. Angela's eyes widened in fear. Danielle, please. Some truths are better left buried. But Danielle's voice was steel. No. Buried truths are what killed this family. I won't live in the dark anymore. Jordan reached for her arm. Dee, be careful. Danielle pulled away. I'll be careful. But I will find out. Her voice echoed through the apartment, carrying more conviction than fear. She didn't know where this path would take her. But she knew one thing for certain. The story of Marcus Williams was not over. And what she uncovered next would turn everything upside down. Danielle didn't waste time. The next morning, she left Jordan's apartment with the letter folded tightly in her bag and a fire burning in her chest. If Marcus had secrets, if Angela's disappearance was tied not just to a single obsessed deacon but to something larger within the church, then she needed proof. She needed to pull every thread until the entire web was exposed. Her first stop was the Atlanta Police Department. She requested access to her mother's old missing person file, citing her right as family. The clerk gave her a tired look, disappearing into the back before returning with a thin, dusty folder. Danielle flipped through it at a corner table. Reports she had practically memorized as a teenager. Witness statements about a woman leaving church. The unverified sightings. The note that no signs of foul play were evident. But one detail stood out now, something she had overlooked before. A line about Marcus being cooperative but evasive. Evasive. That word burned. Danielle pressed her lips together and closed the file. If her father had been hiding something, the community might have known more than the police ever recorded. She turned to the only place that had once been their anchor, Greater Ebenezer Baptist. The church looked the same as it had 15 years earlier. Brick walls weathered but sturdy, stained glass windows catching the morning sun. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of old wood and candle wax. Danielle walked down the aisle where she once sat beside her mother, her knees trembling. Several older congregants still recognized her. Sister Lewis, her mother's old friend, clasped her hands tightly. Danielle, child. I can't believe it's you. Your mama's disappearance broke us all. Danielle's throat tightened. Sister Lewis, I need to know. Was there something about my father? About the deacons? The woman's eyes darted away. Now, baby, some things are better left alone. Danielle pressed harder. Please. I've lost too much already. Just tell me the truth. Sister Lewis lowered her voice. Your daddy was mixed up in things he shouldn't have been. Money, favors, late-night meetings. People said he was indebted to some men tied to the church. But no one would speak against him, not when he had friends in high places. Danielle's stomach nodded. And the deacon? Sister Lewis hesitated. Deacon Harris, he was respected. But respect can hide rot. I saw him watching your mama sometimes, staring too long. People whispered, but no one wanted to believe it. Danielle thanked her and moved on, but every answer only deepened the shadows. Later that day, she found herself at a diner on the edge of town, meeting with an old church usher who had retired years ago. He leaned close over his coffee, voice low. Marcus wasn't clean, Danielle. He owed people money. Sometimes the envelopes he carried in and out of church weren't just for offerings. And when your mama went missing, some of us wondered if it was connected. Danielle's chest tightened. So you think Dad had something to do with it? The usher shook his head. I don't know. But I know this. People at that church knew more than they ever told the police. The truth got buried deep. That night, Danielle sat alone in her rental car outside the church, staring at its darkened windows. Memories of hymns and prayers collided with whispers of secrets and betrayal. The narrative of her family, the one she had clung to for 15 years, was shattering. Angela hadn't been kidnapped. She had fled. Marcus hadn't been a victim of grief. He had been hiding things. And the church, the place that claimed to be a sanctuary, may have been a stage for threats and silence. Now stop here for a second. Imagine being Danielle. Imagine your entire childhood unraveling in front of you, every story you believed about your family and your church revealed as half-truths. Would you keep digging, knowing the answers might ruin everything? Or would you turn back, clinging to the lies that made life easier? If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment to do it. Because the silence that protects secrets like these is the same silence that keeps families suffering. And if you won't subscribe, I want you in the comments explaining why. Because ignoring stories like this doesn't make them go away, it makes them stronger. Danielle gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She thought of her mother crying in that apartment, of Jordan hiding the letter, of Marcus sitting silently at the kitchen table years ago. The truth was within reach, but it wasn't one truth. It was layered, tangled, messy. Her father, the deacon, the church, they were all part of it. And Danielle knew, as she stared into the stained glass darkness, that the answers waiting for her would not bring peace. They would bring devastation. Because some truths don't heal families. Some truths burn them to the ground. The next evening, Danielle gathered them in Jordan's apartment. Angela, Jordan, and an older man who had agreed to meet with her after weeks of hesitation. He was a retired detective, once attached to Angela's missing persons case. His name was Detective Harlan, gray-haired now, his eyes weary but sharp. He had seen too many families broken by silence. The four of them sat in the living room, the tension suffocating. Danielle held the letter in her lap like a weapon. Enough lies, she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. Tell me everything. No more half-truths. No more protecting me. I want the whole story. Angela's eyes shimmered with tears. Her voice came out soft but heavy. Danielle, the truth is worse than you think. She took a deep breath, glancing at Jordan before turning back to her daughter. Your father, Marcus, he wasn't just a trucker trying to make ends meet. He was involved with people inside Greater Ebenezer. Men who used the church as a cover for laundering money, trading favors, even moving stolen goods. He owed them, Danielle. He owed them more than he could ever repay. Danielle's chest tightened. Her breath caught in her throat. Angela's voice cracked. The deacon who threatened me, he wasn't acting alone. He had Marcus under his thumb. He knew Marcus's secrets. He used them to control us both. And when Marcus couldn't keep up with the debt, the deacon turned his attention to me. He said if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd expose Marcus, and you children would grow up in shame, or worse, without either of us. Danielle shook her head in disbelief. So you left us? You left us to protect Dad's secrets. Angela's tears spilled. No. I left because I believed staying meant losing you. If I refused the deacon, if I defied Marcus's world, you would have been in danger. I thought vanishing was the only way to shield you. Detective Harlan cleared his throat. His gravelly voice cut through the air. We suspected Marcus was dirty, but without evidence we couldn't touch him. And when Angela disappeared, some of us thought she might have been silenced permanently. The department didn't want to dig too deep into church affairs. Too many connections. Too much power. Danielle's pulse raced. She turned to him sharply. So you knew? You all knew and just let us suffer? Harlan's eyes dimmed. Knowing isn't the same as proving. But yes, whispers followed Marcus. The church was untouchable back then. Danielle's head spun. Her father wasn't just flawed, he had been part of something corrupt. The church wasn't just negligent, it had been complicit. And her mother's vanishing wasn't just an act of cowardice, it was survival. Now stop here for a second. Imagine learning your entire childhood was a lie. Your church, a place of supposed sanctuary, was hiding crimes. Your father, the man you trusted, was knee-deep in corruption. And your mother, the woman you grieved for 15 years, chose disappearance over honesty. Would you ever trust anyone again? If you haven't subscribed yet, this is why you must. Because silence protects monsters. And if you still won't subscribe, tell me in the comments why. Because if you look away from stories like this, you're no different from the people who buried the truth. Angela's voice softened, her shoulders sagging as though she had carried this weight for too long. I built another life as Linda. It was never happiness, it was survival. I wanted to come back, but I feared the past would swallow you both if I did. Every year, every holiday, I told myself it wasn't safe. And every year, I hated myself more for staying away. Danielle's face twisted with rage and grief. You hated yourself? What about us? I was 12, Jordan was 8. We cried ourselves to sleep for years. We thought you were dead. Dad died with questions he never answered. You think your guilt compares to our pain? Angela flinched, silent. Detective Harlan slid a folder onto the coffee table. Danielle's eyes snapped to it. 2 months ago, Harlan said, some of those old church records surfaced. Bank ledgers, receipts, testimonies from people who finally broke their silence. It confirms what Angela told you. Marcus was involved. The deacon too. It's all there. Danielle's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Pages filled with numbers, names, signatures, her father's among them. Proof. Irrefutable. The betrayal was no longer rumor. It was fact. Jordan wiped his face, tears streaking his cheeks. I tried to shield you from this. I didn't want you to remember Dad as a criminal. Danielle slammed the folder shut. Shield me? No. You buried the truth. Just like Mom. Just like the church. And now look at us, broken beyond repair. Silence fell heavy over the room. Angela whispered, Danielle, I can't ask for your forgiveness, but I'm begging you to understand. I ran because I loved you. Danielle stood, her body shaking. No, you ran because you were afraid. And you left us in the fire. Her voice cracked, raw and bitter. You all did. The room was suffocating with grief, betrayal, and truths that had come too late. And outside that apartment, the community stirred as whispers turned into headlines. The church, once untouchable, was now under scrutiny. Marcus Williams's name, once respected, was being dragged through mud. And Angela's reappearance threatened to unravel everything people thought they knew. But for Danielle, the revelations weren't just shocking. They were devastating. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it destroys everything you thought you had left. The revelations rippled through Atlanta like a stone tossed into still water. Headlines screamed about corruption tied to Greater Ebenezer Baptist. Old secrets resurfaced, money laundering, intimidation, hush payments that stretched back decades. Angela Williams's reappearance was no longer just a family story, it was a community reckoning. Some people refused to believe it. Not Marcus, a neighbor insisted to a reporter. He was a good man, a family man. Others whispered that they had always suspected something darker. And the church, once a beacon, now stood under a shadow it could never erase. Inside Jordan's apartment, the family fractured further. Jordan avoided Danielle's eyes, his guilt heavy. Angela tried to speak, but every word only deepened Danielle's rage. For years she had built her identity on grief, grief for her mother's disappearance, grief for her father's death. Now that grief was tangled with betrayal, and no apology could untangle it. Angela reached for her daughter's hand. Danielle, please. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try. I want to be your mother again. Danielle pulled back sharply. Her voice shook, brittle but firm. You don't get to just come back. You don't get to vanish for 15 years and expect us to welcome you. Jordan tried to mediate, his voice breaking. She was scared. She thought she was protecting us. Danielle cut him off. No, she was protecting herself. And Dad, he wasn't the man I thought he was either. So who was protecting me? Who was protecting you? The silence that followed was unbearable. Angela wept. Jordan lowered his head. And Danielle stood, pacing the floor, her heart hammering with fury. Now think about this. Imagine realizing both of your parents betrayed you in different ways. One by leaving, the other by hiding dangerous secrets. Imagine growing up in shadows, only to discover that the light of truth burns worse than the darkness. Would you forgive? Or would you feel like Danielle, angry, raw, unresolved? If you're watching this and haven't subscribed, do it now. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they warn. They remind us that the people we trust most can hide the darkest truths. And if you still won't subscribe, then explain why in the comments. Because turning away from stories like this is turning away from the truth. The days that followed were a blur. News crews camped outside the church. Former members gave interviews, some defending their leaders, others exposing them. The Williams family became unwilling figures in a scandal that stretched far beyond their own pain. Danielle couldn't escape it. Every time she turned on the television, there was her mother's face, her father's name, her family's tragedy dissected for the world. Strangers debated whether Angela was a coward or a victim, whether Marcus was a criminal or a man trapped by circumstance. But no one debated what Danielle knew in her bones. None of them had protected her. Jordan tried to hold the family together, inviting Angela to stay, urging Danielle to forgive. But Danielle couldn't. She couldn't sit at the same table with the woman who had abandoned her. She couldn't mourn her father the same way now that she knew the truth. One evening, as the sun set over Atlanta, Danielle stood at her father's grave. The headstone was simple, weathered by rain and time. She placed the letter on the ground, the paper fluttering in the wind. "You weren't who I thought you were," she whispered. "But you were still my father. And I don't know how to carry that." Her voice broke, but no tears came. She had cried them all years ago. Later, she walked away from the cemetery without looking back. Angela waited for her outside the gate, hands folded, eyes red. "Danielle, can we try? Please. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking." Danielle looked at her mother for a long moment, her heart heavy. Then she shook her head. "Sometimes the truth doesn't heal," she said quietly. "Sometimes it just leaves deeper wounds." She turned and walked away, leaving Angela frozen in place. Now pause and think carefully. We crave answers, we demand the truth, but what if the truth doesn't bring peace? What if it rips open scars that never close? If you're watching this, remember, some doors once opened can never be shut again. Subscribe now, because the next story we uncover may hold the same kind of truths that don't set you free but haunt you forever. And if you won't subscribe, then I need you in the comments explaining why. Because ignoring the darkness doesn't protect you from it. As night fell over Atlanta, Danielle walked alone, the city buzzing around her. Her family was shattered. Her childhood rewritten. And the truth, after all these years, had brought no comfort. The community was left in shock, debating guilt and innocence. But Danielle knew the truth was layered, messy, and impossible to untangle. And for her, the only certainty was this. The truth doesn't always deliver justice. It doesn't always bring closure. Sometimes the truth is the cruelest betrayal of all. Angela came back, but not as the mother Danielle remembered. Marcus died, but not as the man his children thought he was. And the truth, after 15 long years, didn't bring peace, it only cut deeper. So I'll leave you with this. If your loved one vanished tomorrow, what secrets would be uncovered when the silence broke? Would you be ready for the answers? Or would they destroy everything you thought you knew? Do stories like this make your heart race? Then subscribe right now. Because the next case I cover might not just be about a stranger, it could mirror the secrets inside your own family. And if you choose not to subscribe, tell me why in the comments. Because in a world where silence protects the guilty, refusing to listen might be the most dangerous choice of all.